My name is Halloran Boyce, and the man who destroyed my life got into my shuttle van, tipped me $3, and told me to have a good flight. He didn't recognize me. I'd worked for him, no. He'd worked for me, for 6 years. And on a Tuesday last April, Nathaniel Quist sat 4 feet behind my head with 2 suitcases and called me man, the way you'd call anyone man, the way you say it when the person you're saying it to doesn't have a name because they don't have a face because they don't count. He tipped me $3. I still have those $3. They're in a drawer in my apartment, next to a newspaper clipping and a folded photograph I'll tell you about later. And I know exactly what it says about a 71-year-old man that he keeps $3 in a drawer. I've made my peace with what it says, because those $3 were the most expensive tip Nathaniel Quist ever paid in his life. He just didn't know it yet. Let me back up. I'm 71 years old. I've got a bad knee, a shuttle van, and, until about a year ago, a life so quiet you could have mistaken me for the furniture. Which, as it turns out, is exactly what most people did. For 9 years I drove a van at the airport. $41,000 a year, later 43. Row H, Terminal B, sell lot back around again. 11 minutes a loop if the traffic's kind. Here's a thing nobody tells you about driving a shuttle van. You disappear. People get in, and to them you are a seat that happens to steer. They talk on their phones. They fight with their wives. They say things 4 feet from your head that they would never say if they thought you were a person. I once drove a man 11 whole minutes while he explained to his wife, in tender detail, why his flight got delayed. When I had personally watched him climb out of a taxi from the hotel across the road, dry as a bone, no delay anywhere in sight. You hear everything back there. You are trusted with everything, precisely because nobody thinks they're trusting you with anything. I mention this because it matters. It's the whole story, really, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The thing about that airport, and I never told a soul this in 9 years, not one, is that the long-term parking lot sits on land I used to own. Not the neighborhood, the land. Row H, that stretch of asphalt where the rental cars bake in the sun, my house was there. My kitchen was somewhere around space H44. Verona planted a garden out back that she designed herself, every bed of it over 31 years. They paved it, and every single morning for 9 years, I clocked in and drove past the spot where my wife used to grow tomatoes, and I said nothing, and I looked away. I built a company called Boyce Structural. Started in 1988 in a rented office over a nail salon because my father died a tenant and I decided I wouldn't. By 2011, I had 206 employees and my name on the side of a 9-story building downtown. In aluminum, 3-foot letters. Verona said it was vulgar. She was right. I did it anyway because I was 51 and I'd earned the right to be a little vulgar. Nathaniel Quist came to work for me in 2006. 32, sharp as a chisel. One of those men who asks you a question that makes you feel smart for having been asked it. I made him CFO in 2009, and I want to be honest with you, because if I lie to you here, the whole rest of this falls apart. I didn't promote him because he tricked me. I promoted him because he was the best financial mind that ever walked into my building. I'd make the same call today. That's the part that still keeps me up. The man who buried me was excellent at his job. I'll do the how of it fast, because the how isn't the story. In 2013, we won the Firest Interchange. $240 million, 4 years, the job that meant we'd never worry again. 18 months in, the state auditor found that our certified payrolls had been falsified. Hours nobody worked. Workers reclassified to lower pay rates. $4.1 million in fraud. And every one of those documents carried my electronic signature, not Nathaniel's, mine, because I was the qualifying officer of record, and I'd never read a single one because that's what you have a CFO for. The state debarred us from public work for 10 years on a company that did 60% public work. We were bankrupt by March of 2015, liquidated by November. 206 people lost their jobs. I lost the company, the building, the house, the pension, and Because I signed a settlement with a personal guarantee, I didn't understand as well as a man my age should have everything Verona and I had put away in 27 years. I was never charged. The Attorney General declined to prosecute. The paper ran that on page 9, 16 months after they'd run my face on the front. By then it didn't matter. In this town, I was the man who stole $4 million from working people. Verona died in 2019, cancer. I won't tell you it was the stress because I don't know, and I'm not going to build a story out of my wife. But she died in a rented duplex on Castro Street, and she spent the last 4 years of her life without her garden, and that's the part I have never gotten over, and I'd like to move past it now if that's all right with you. And Nathaniel Quist landed on his feet. He testified as a cooperating witness, said he'd raised concerns and been overruled, produced 2 emails from 2014 that say almost nothing when you read them cold, but read like a warning if somebody tells you first that they're a warning. He was never charged either. He went to Charlotte, then came back in 2020 as an executive at Grandhome Development. And in 2023, Grandhome bought that 9-story building downtown. Nathaniel Quist took my aluminum letters off the side and put theirs up. There was a photo of it in the business section. That's the photo in my drawer, next to the $3. So, now you understand the man in the second row. I recognized his voice before I even got the mirror on him. 11 years, and I'd have picked that voice out of a stadium. He was on the phone, and here is what my former CFO said, 4 feet behind my head, while I merged onto the service road. Because the fires thing has a shelf life, Marguerite. 10 years. It comes off the record in 25. A pause. No, that's the beauty of it. Nobody relitigates a debarment after it expires. It just falls off. Another pause, and then, Boyce is driving a van somewhere. He's not a factor. I'm going to tell you what I did, and you're not going to like it, and that's fine. I drove him to Terminal B, I said. Have a good flight, sir. He said, thanks, man, and he tipped me $3, and he walked into the terminal without once looking at my face. And then I sat in the cell lot for 40 minutes with the engine off, shaking. Not because he'd insulted me. I'd been insulted for 9 years. I was a professional at it by then. I was shaking because of 4 words. It comes off the record. He was counting. 11 years later, that man was still tracking the calendar on the thing that ruined me, which meant it wasn't over for him, which meant there was something left to be over. And I'll tell you something I learned running a company for 27 years. You do not count down a clock unless you are standing underneath it. Now, here's where a story like this usually turns into a clever old man cracking the whole thing open by himself in a basement full of newspaper clippings. That is not what happened. What happened is I spent 4 months getting absolutely nowhere. And then a woman I'd spent a decade avoiding called me a coward in a Cracker Barrel parking lot. Her name is Delphine Sallow. She was my accounts payable supervisor for 9 years, and the last time I'd seen her before all this was in a hallway in 2015, where she told me, and she meant it, that she hoped I'd lost everything. She put her whole retirement in company stock, because in 2011 I stood up in front of a room of my people and told them I believed in this place. So when her voicemail said, Hallen, it's Delphine, and you're going to want to hang up, don't. I'll admit my thumb hovered over the button. I didn't hang up. Best decision I made in 10 years, and I didn't even make it. I just failed to make the wrong one. She wouldn't come inside to meet me. We stood in the parking lot, first thing out of her mouth. Before anything, I'm not sorry about the hallway. All right, I said. You want me to be sorry. Delphine, I've had 9 years to think about that hallway, and I've decided you were about 80% right. That stopped her cold. She'd come loaded for a fight, and I'd handed her nothing to shoot at. 80, she said. You said I should have known. That's right, and I'll carry it. You said I did it. That's wrong. I've made my peace with the 80. She stood there a long while with her arms crossed, and then she said the thing that turned the whole world over. Ardith Compliance was named after me. I didn't say a word. I want to point that out because at 71, The one skill I've genuinely improved is knowing when to shut my mouth. Arthur Compliance Group. I knew that name. It was the third-party payroll processor that filed the fraudulent certified payrolls. In my 4 months of getting nowhere, it was the one thing I'd found that smelled wrong. A company formed in November 2013 that took Boyce Structural as its first and only client in December 2013 and dissolved in August 2015. 21 months of life. One client. And I could not, for the life of me, find out who owned it. Nathaniel came to me in October 2013, Delphine said. Told me the state was going to require a certified processor on Firest, and it'd be cheaper to spin one up in-house than hire out. Asked me to sign the formation paperwork, because he couldn't conflict of interest being CFO. Said it'd dissolve when the job ended, and I'd get a little bump for the trouble. How much of a bump? $8,000. Her jaw was working. That's what I sold you for, Helen, and I didn't even know I was doing it. You didn't sell me, I said. You signed your name to something you didn't read, and then you spent a decade finding out what it was. I looked at her. I know exactly how that feels. I'm the world expert on how that feels. And I watched that land on her. I watched a decade of hating me wobble just slightly on its foundation. Why now, Delphine? 9 years, why call me now? Because he called me in June, she said. First time since 2015. Wanted to know if I still had my copies of the Ardith formation documents. Said it'd be cleaner if I got rid of them. And you told him. I told him I threw them out in 2016. Did you? And Delphine Sallow looked me dead in the eye and said, Helen, I have never thrown away a piece of paper in my life. I was your AP supervisor. I laughed. First real laugh I'd had in longer than I can tell you. She didn't laugh, but the corner of her mouth did something, and I decided to count it. Before you get excited, she said, the formation papers don't prove anything. He's not on them, I am. I know. Delphine. I leaned on the hood of her car because my knee was going. Why is a man who's supposedly clean calling a woman he hasn't spoken to in 9 years and asking her to destroy documents? She went still. He's not scared of the papers, I said. He's scared of you. You're the last living person who can testify to a conversation that happened in October 2013. He's not trying to erase evidence. He's trying to erase a witness. And that's the moment Delphine Sallow stopped being the woman who hoped I'd lose everything, and started being the reason Nathaniel Quist is where he is today. Now, I'd love to tell you we cracked it with one brilliant move. We didn't. We did 3 unglamorous things, and I'm going to tell you all 3, because the truth is more satisfying than the fantasy. 1, we went and got our people. Delphine had kept the old company phone tree. Of course she had. 206 names. We found 31 of them still in the county, and over the next few months, an old man everyone thought was a thief, and the woman who told him she hoped he'd rot sat in 31 kitchens and asked one question. What do you remember about the payroll change in early 2014? 26 people remembered nothing. 5 remembered everything. A field super named Oz Robatz remembered being told to reclassify 4 laborers as apprentices on his daily reports, and being told it came from the top. He'd assumed the top meant me. He'd assumed that for 11 years. A payroll clerk named Win Hargis remembered being locked out of the certified payroll module in January 2014, told it was a software transition. She stayed locked out for the entire Firest job. She'd thought it was strange for 11 years and never told a living soul, because who do you even tell? And that's the thing nobody understands about how a big fraud actually works. It isn't one villain doing one enormous evil thing. It's 40 ordinary people each seeing one small strange thing, and every single one of them assuming the person above them must know. I was the person above them, and I didn't know. And that is my failure, and I'll carry it to the grave, but it is a completely different failure than the one they took my house for. 2, we found the money. Or rather, Delphine did, because she is a better bookkeeper than I ever dreamed of being. Arthur Compliance built Boyce Structural $610,000 over 21 months. Hi, but not insane for a job that size. Then Arthur turned around and paid $440,000 of it to a consulting shell in Delaware. Delphine found the shell. Then she found its 2016 dissolution filing. And on that filing, because somewhere in Delaware on a Friday, somebody got sloppy or lazy or just tired, there was a signature. And Quest member. One signature. One time in 11 years of being careful. That's all it ever is. 3, and this is the one that mattered. We did not go to the newspaper. God, I wanted to. I had a whole daydream where I walked into the marble lobby of Grand Home Development with a folder under my arm and a reporter at my side, and I set the whole thing on fire in front of him. Delphine killed that idea in about 90 seconds. Harlan, you are a convicted thief in this town. I was never convicted. Nobody knows that, and nobody's going to learn it from a press conference held by you. She jabbed a finger at my chest. You go public. You're a bitter old man with a theory. You're the least credible person in this state on this exact subject. You'll hand him the easiest defense he ever had. So what do I do? And she said the smartest thing anybody said in this entire business. You give it to somebody who can't be called bitter. So we built it. 180 pages. Not a plea for help, an argument. An argument that the 2015 finding had named the wrong man. Backed by a signature, a money trail, and 5 sworn statements from the very working people I was supposed to have robbed. And then we walked it into the last place on earth I ever wanted to see again, the state auditor's office. The same office that took my life apart in 2015. That was Delphine's idea too, and here's the genius of it. That office had a 9-year-old finding with their name on it. And the one thing an auditing body cannot stand, the one thing that keeps them up at night, is the possibility of being wrong on the public record. We weren't asking them to save an old man. We were handing them a chance to correct themselves before somebody else did it for them. I sat in that room for 4 hours. Delphine did most of the talking, which was correct, because I'd have wept. And near the end, a deputy auditor named Corinne Villaverde, maybe 40, hadn't even worked there in 2015, looked up from the Delaware filing with the signature on it and said, "Mr. Boyce, why didn't anyone bring this in 2015? And I said, "Ma'am, in 2015 I was trying to keep my house." She wrote something down, and she didn't look at me like I was a thief. That was the first time in 9 years that a person with any power in this town looked at me and didn't see a thief. I remember the exact feeling. It was like taking off a coat I'd forgotten I was wearing. Now here's where the old story would have you wait 11 quiet months for some dusty, bureaucratic paperwork to grind out a result. That's not how it went. Corinne Villaverde read our file over a single weekend, and she did not sleep, and by Monday she had done the math I'd been living inside for a decade. When an auditor who wasn't there in 2015 realizes her own office ruined an innocent man, and that the guilty one is still out there, still climbing, still counting down his little clock, she does not move slowly. She moved like the building was on fire. And she timed it. That's the part I love. She timed it. Because Nathaniel Quist had a groundbreaking that Thursday. Grand Home was breaking ground on a new development downtown, and there was going to be a gold-painted shovel and a photographer and the mayor, and Nathaniel Quist was going to stand at the podium in a good suit and smile. On Thursday morning, 3 things happened inside the same hour. The auditor's office served Grand Home Development with a formal amended finding, hand-delivered, on the record, that morning, stating that the 2015 FIRE's determination had misidentified the responsible party. A federal grand jury which had been quietly handed everything returned an indictment. Wire fraud, false claims, Nathaniel Quist's name on it, not mine, and a reporter, one Delphine had walked the file to, because I'm a thief in this town and she is not, ran the story at 9 a.m. Nathaniel Quist found out he was finished from a reporter shouting a question across a construction site. On camera, with the gold shovel still in his hand. I've seen the footage more times than I'd like to admit. You can watch the color leave his face in real time. You can watch the mayor take one step away from him, and then another, the way you step away from a man who's just been revealed to be radioactive. You can watch Nathaniel Quist open his mouth to say something clever, because he always had something clever, and find, for the first time in his life, that there was nothing there. He resigned by lunch. The building came next. The state's amended finding didn't just clear a dead company. It detonated the reputation Granholm had built its downtown deals on. Within a month, 2 of their financing partners walked, and the 9-story building downtown, the one with his letters on the side where my aluminum used to be, Granholm had to sell it to stay upright. They took his letters down. Nobody put mine back up. I want to be clear about that. This isn't that kind of story. But I drove past that building the week they stripped the letters off, and I pulled over. I've developed a habit of pulling over, and I looked at the bare face of it, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 11 years. I felt even. Now, here's the part I actually want to tell you about, because the indictment isn't the story. The building isn't the story. The story is what happened in my van. I could have walked away from the airport. I want you to know that. After the amended finding, the lawyers came out of the woodwork. There was a wrongful debarment claim, a defamation angle, real money, the kind of money that buys back a house, maybe even a garden. I told every one of them no. And there's a version of me that can't explain why, but I think I finally can, because on the Monday after the story broke, I put on my uniform and I drove my van. And he never forgot it. Osgood met me in the lot with the newspaper folded under his arm and his eyes wet, and he said, "Hallen, you don't have to be here." And I said, "I know that's why I am. Because for 9 years I drove that route praying nobody would recognize me, praying to stay furniture, praying to disappear into the seat." That Monday, everything ran backwards. The first one was a woman at Terminal A sharp suit, phone already out, all business. Then she looked at my ID badge. Then she looked at my face, and she went very quiet. "You're him," she said. "You're the man from the paper." 11 years of bracing for what comes after those words. 11 years of flinching. She put her phone down in her lap, and she said, "My father lost his pension when his company went under. Everybody blamed him. Nobody ever fixed it. Nobody ever stood up and said out loud that he was innocent." Her voice cracked right down the middle. "They said it about you, on the front page. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" I didn't have one thing to say to that. When she got out at Terminal C, she didn't tip me. She took my hand in both of hers, the way you take someone's hand at a funeral, and she said, "Thank you for not letting them win." That was the first. There were more, and I'm not going to pretend I remember them all, because there got to be a lot of them, and my memory's bad. And I already lied to you once today by keeping $3 in a drawer. A city councilman I'd driven a dozen times without a single word rode his 11 minutes, and at the very end, right hand on the door, he said quietly, "I voted for that debarment resolution in 2015. I want you to know I've been ashamed of it since Thursday." He left his card on the seat. "Anything you need in this city, anything at all. But the one I'll carry to the grave is Ozro Batts, the field super, the one who reclassified those laborers because he thought the order came from me. He'd found out from the paper what he'd really done, that he'd been one of the 40 people who each saw one strange thing and assumed the man above them knew, and he could not live with it. So he found out my route, and he stood at Terminal B for 2 hours in the sun, on a bad hip of his own until my van came around. And he climbed in, and he sat down in the second row, the same second row where Nathaniel Quist had tipped me $3, and for a full minute, Ozro Batts could not get a single word out. Then he said, "Mr. Boyce, for 11 years I thought you did it. I told people you did it. I'm the reason some of them believed it." He was shaking. "This is a man who poured concrete for 40 years. I helped bury you, and I didn't even know I was holding the shovel. And I pulled that van over. On the airport service road, 4 other passengers watching, probably certain I'd lost my mind. And I turned all the way around in my seat, and I looked that man in the eye, and I said, "Osro, you saw one strange thing, and you assumed the man above you knew. That's not a crime. That's just what it is to be a working man in a world built by people like Quist." And Osro Batts, 60 years old, hands like cinder blocks, put his face in those hands and wept in the back of my shuttle van. I let him. I didn't say anything else. Some things you don't fix with words. You just pull the van over and you let a man be sorry, because being allowed to be sorry is its own kind of mercy, and I'd wanted somebody to give it to me for 11 years. So that's why I still drive. People ask me all the time now, and they do ask, because I'm a little bit known in this town in a way I never wanted and now wouldn't trade. Why an exonerated man with 3 standing offers to sit on consulting boards, a man who could put his name back on a building in real aluminum, 3-foot letters, if he'd just show up to the ribbon cutting. Why that man still drives a shuttle van for $43,000 a year. And here's the truth I finally figured out. At 71, in the cell lot with the engine off. I never actually lost the building. The building was aluminum. You can put aluminum on anything. What I lost in 2015 was the belief that people would say my name and mean something good by it. That's the thing they took. That's the thing I grieved for a decade in a rented duplex while my wife's garden grew tomatoes for strangers. And a consulting board can't give that back. A lawsuit can't. A building sure as hell can't. But the curb at Departures gives it back to me every single day. Strangers who read the story and looked me in the eye and decided I was a man worth respecting. You can't buy that. You can only earn it back one 11-minute ride at a time. Nathaniel Quist stood on a stage with a gold shovel and lost everything he had in front of a camera in the space of an hour. And the last I heard, he doesn't leave his house much. I sit in a shuttle van, and grown men weep in my back seat and thank me for survival. He had the building. He had the title. He had 2 more years left on his little clock. 2 more years, and the whole thing would have fallen off the record, and he'd have been clean forever. He was almost right. Delphine pointed that out to me at dinner last month. We have dinner about once a month now, and she still isn't sorry about the hallway, and I've stopped asking. 2 more years, she said, and it'd have fallen right off and he'd have walked. He was almost right, I said. What he miss? And I said, he got in my van. She laughed at that. Delphine Sallow finally laughed, 11 years late in a Mexican restaurant, and I decided that laugh was worth more than the building too. So let me leave you with the one thing, and then I'll let you go. Nathaniel Quist did not lose because he was careless. That man signed his name exactly 1 time in 11 years, and it was in Delaware on a Friday, when he thought no one would ever look. He lost because he said the quiet part out loud in front of the help. Everybody's got somebody they don't see. A driver, a nurse, the woman at the desk, the fellow who empties the bin, and they'll swear up and down they treat everybody the same, and most of them even believe it. But you find out exactly what a man is by what he'll say in front of the people. He decided I didn't count. He lost to a shuttle driver. He lost to the help. He lost to the man in row H, the one whose kitchen is under the asphalt at space H44, the one he tipped $3 and told to have a good flight. I drove that man 11 minutes. That's all it took. And every morning now, I put on my uniform and I drive my route. And I go right past space H44 where Verona's garden used to be, and for the first time in 11 years, I don't look away. I built that, not the parking lot, not the building. The reason 100 people finally said my name out loud in this town, and meant something good by it. That I built, and nobody's ever taking it down. What an incredible lesson in resilience and quiet justice. Halloran Boyce proved that dignity isn't found in a name on a building, but in standing up when it matters most. What did you think about how Nathaniel Quist finally exposed himself? Have you ever witnessed someone reveal their true colors when they thought no one was paying attention? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you have a story of standing your ground, unexpected revenge, or reclaiming your life that you'd like featured on this channel, send it to us at stories@thepatreachsync.com. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Until next time, stay vigilant.